Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video you're going to learn why Microsoft's vision is that every .NET developer out there will be using .NET Aspire in the future. This idea and this vision is coming by Microsoft themselves, and this video is a discussion between me, a distinguished engineer at Microsoft, David Fowler, which is one of the main people behind Aspire, as well as many other things in .NET, such as NuGet, SignalR, .NET Core, and many, many more. We're going to discuss Inception, current state, change of direction, and what the future holds for .NET Aspire, and it's very, very exciting. The only thing I have to say before you enjoy the video is that until the 28th of February, we're offering our 2 C# courses for free on Dome Train, lifetime access. Click the link, get them, and you keep them forever. Enjoy the video. So David, welcome to this video here for the second time, and hopefully not the last one. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Happy to be here. I got on my Aspire shirt. Look at that.
I saw. Can I get one?
I'm dressed just for you. I'm dressed just... You can get one.
I asked for one at the
Yeah, of
Microsoft
course.
booth, and they didn't have any Aspire.
We didn't give you one? Oh,
They
man.
didn't have one.
You didn't get one yet? I'm surprised.
No, Maddie should have one. Just give me one.
Exactly. I'll make it happen. Don't worry.
Awesome. So for anyone living under a rock, or if someone hasn't heard about you before, who are you and what you're doing? And don't say you're an engineer in the .NET team, because everyone that's like, I am the CTO, I'm an engineer in the .NET team. So tell us what your job title is.
I am a distinguished engineer on .NET. And I've been working on Aspire for the last year and a half. How long has it been? Feels like longer, but it's been, I think it's only been like a year or so. So yeah, I mean, what I worked on in .NET, I worked on NuGet, SignalR, ASP.NET Core, lots of other really cool things. But I've been around for like 17 years. So
That's wild.
out of college, interned on the ASP.NET team, joined full time, and then I've kind of been on the same team like for like 17 years working on this cool stuff.
Famously a QA intern.
Yeah, so funny. My first intern was QA. My school was like really known for like being QAs.
Yeah.
So I remember spending my first summer. We had like 4 interns in the same office. It was really cool. It was hot, but it was cool. And then the next year I was a dev intern, and then it was just from then I've been the whole time. Yeah.
Skyrocketed. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've worked
Yeah.
basically. If there's anything interesting in .NET in the past 15 years, you've worked on it.
I try to.
or you built it, you know.
Yeah. It's funny because like a lot of the ASP.NET team now is like pretty new. I think only maybe 3 or 4 of us are there from the original team. But it's fun like to explain to people kind of how we got to that place. It's like no. When we first did this, I feel like an old person. I'm like, yeah. So back in my day, when we first did this feature, like there was no VS, blah blah blah.
Yeah. I'm gonna focus like this discussion, given you have more of a limited time today, just on Aspire. And
Yep.
I will kind of assume most people know what Aspire like kinda is, but you can also, if you could just explain what Aspire is, as if I'm maybe not a 5-year-old, but like if I'm a junior developer coming into .NET, what is Aspire?
Yeah. It's funny, we've been fine-tuning this pitch just like over and over because I think if you were to ask me this question a year and a half ago, I would have had a completely different answer to what I have now based on kind of seeing usage. I would say something like this. When you join a company or join a team, you want to onboard quickly. You want to know how to run the project. The project probably has set up for certificates, host files. You got to copy some files into this folder. You got to see the database over here. You got to run like 7 steps to onboard. Depending on the company size, team size, complexity of the project, the README for the instructions for setup can be like 1 page or a wiki. Maybe onboarding is a week or whatever, right? And it's really hard to codify those steps in something that's not just text. Like, copy this file over here, put this cert in the cert store, use this name. Aspire lets people turn that into code. So F5 just works.
Yeah.
So your README turns into a set of steps described in your application. And I joined the company, I hit F5, my onboarding went from, a week or a couple of days to I can just do it in a couple of minutes. That's been the bread and butter scenario for Aspire, I think, in the last year or so. I can onboard super quickly. That paradigm can extend to other parts of the SDLC. It's not just for local dev, but we started there.
Yeah.
That's the whole model. Like, I told someone, there's a guy in your company somewhere deep in the company who spent a week trying to figure out the exact command line arguments to pass to this tool. Right? There's that guy who's like, man, I searched for like 10 days on different sites, and I found that I have to pass the arguments with this escaping on this OS, and that is now a script in their source control.
Yeah.
You could take that problem and multiply it by all the people in the world who have to do that same thing. Aspire lets you encapsulate that configuration and that call in a NuGet package. So you can kind of share these configurations across like multiple teams, multiple places. I think that's the magic.
Yeah. For us, it's very funny you say that, because for us, in the last company I worked for, we had this goal we had to hit, which is like time to F5, which is how long it takes to be able to just press F5 and everything just works without you having to run a very complicated setup thing. And normally, like the first time, we would include a bash script that would do a git clone on every repository, put them in this correctly named folder with this folder structure, because the build sequence had relative paths and everything. And it was wild. And I'm really sad, partially, that I can't experience it like in that way. And you might ask, why can't you use Aspire for DOM Train, for example, my platform? And I do, but the vast majority of that platform is on Azure Functions, which only recently came to like preview.
Yeah.
Yep. So once those are out, I'll be on that, because it just simplifies everything so much. But
yep.
Why are you making .NET Aspire now?
Yeah, that's a super good question. The beginning of Aspire, we had an offsite. So normally, I want to say every now and then, we'll have ideas floating around the team. And we had this idea. We were going to go off for a while. We had the code name was System Distributed. That was like the code name before we started doing anything. And a couple of us were just throwing around ideas about what it would mean to build like something made for cloud or made for these new style environments. Like, what would it, if you were going to go back to first principles, what would you build? And we kind of came up with a set of problems and scenarios. And it was like, we need to solve all these practical problems first, like configuration. When you are trying to build an app that has more than one thing, your app, a backend, a database, a cache, you spend so much time trying to figure out how to make those things connect and work well. And that kind of was like, okay, if this is the first thing we solve, we work on the practical problems, right? I think it was like practical, and there was the other problems like state management and distributed systems, the hard problems, right? Like cat theory and distributed state. And we were like, if we focus on the practical problems, what are they and how do people do it today? Like, what is the system you use to like solve time to F5? How do you model ports, connection strings? So we kind of did an evaluation of the current tech, and it was like, what's missing? And we had time, right? So we didn't come from the code. It was like, we did a couple of experiments. What makes the system hard to use? Like, what makes it hard today? And it's the amount of variety, it's the amount of different software you have to combine to get the system working. It's not that it's impossible. I think one of the things that I realize people don't see is, as an individual, you learned how to use Compose or Docker or all these things yourself. You spent time, you went online, learned how it worked, and you got your app working. You got this one app working, right? Everyone in the world is doing that. Everyone in the world has to replicate, I want to use Redis, and I want passwords, and I want TLS. And everyone's copying this thing from all their previous projects over and over and over. Everyone has to figure out in .NET, you're supposed to use this client with this connection string specifically. The configuration is not encapsulated anywhere. So you have the image. The image is great. Like, give me Redis/Redis.
Yep.
Amazing. Docker pull, run, it just works. You have to configure it. You have to set passwords up and all the stuff up. You have to then in your application consume that. While it's not impossible or difficult, can we make it turnkey? Can we basically make it so that you are telling us, I want to model this system, and then if you give it that information, what can we do with it? That was kind of like the whole idea of the app post. It was like, first of all, is it YAML or is it code?
Yeah.
When we chose to use code, we were very worried. It was like everyone's doing YAML. Like Ty was YAML, and then Ruben, who famously worked on Orleans, was like, let's just use code.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, let's do it. And that was the reason. It was we want to up level a bit and think about helping people that are building .NET applications solve the next layer of problems. Like my app is done. I got it's been at core going, caching. Like we built a really solid like core platform. Like it's just super fast and it's great and it keeps improving. And then you want to deploy it or use it in a different environment. It's like go learn 15 different tools and then do this.
Yeah.
And now you got it working. Don't touch it, right?
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, that was the idea.
So that sort of differs than what you mentioned before about why Microsoft is making .NET Aspire, because this goes more into the distributed systems, modern applications using multiple, maybe databases or multiple things.
Yep.
To me, wanting to run my projects, because the wanting to run my projects and bring everything together is one of the run multiple CS projects or multiple assemblies.
Yeah.
So it's not the VS's multi-run or
multi-start run.
Yeah, you'd have Aspire now do the debugging for you, and then you go through everything. Yep. So I do see a bit of a not identity crisis, but it sounds like it was marketed in the beginning as a cloud native distributed systems thing. And the more I see it being developed from .NET 8, 1, 2, and now 9, it turns into a more general thing.
That's right. So I think the impetus was definitely distributed systems, cloud native apps. It was made for that purpose. It's why we have the end-to-end where you can do ACD up and it just goes into Azure, right? Yeah. But I think as platform designers, what we end up doing naturally is you built this thing and then you begin to see it be used and you're like, oh, and you're like product market fit, right? So like now, so we said to ourselves, okay, it seems like this inner loop time to F5 thing is like where everyone's seeing the value in the short term. So we pivoted and said, okay, let's just spend all of our time polishing that experience. Let's make the end-to-end really good. Let's make the dashboard really good. Let's make, we added wait for because people were asking for it. And it turned into, okay, we really have this like platform you can target to build, it's difficult to kind of describe this to people who are just trying to make their app work, because making your app work is super important for that one person. But we're thinking about everyone who has to do that same operation. And if everyone is doing the same thing, can we make it dirt simple to say, give me a database, a cache, a Redis, a project, wire it up. Once you've given us that information, we can do a lot of stuff with it. Yeah. So I think what you're seeing is, we started off being cloud focused and cloud native only. But the more people start to use it, we said to ourselves, this is just like a general purpose runner shell kind of system that can do arbitrary things, right? Now, we still care a lot about the end-to-end where you can go to the cloud and make the whole thing work. I mean, we have all these features for that end-to-end, right? But I think you're going to see a breakdown of the layers. You're going to see like us saying, okay, now there's this core platform where you can model resources, and then there's a system that can take that and do like deployments, whatever else in the pipeline. So this is, I think for me, this is you start with a premise of like, we want to target this. And then your customers show you, well, that's cool, but guess what? Your thing is really good at this thing. And we're like, okay, let's figure out how to go from that premise to like, let's extract the essence and make it usable for all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've talked to you about that exact thing when it first came out. Because to me, Aspire, in a way, sort of looks like Microsoft's answer to Java's Spring. Is that fair to say? And the success that this stack has.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were discussions that we had like really early on because some of the questions came from, what is your Spring Boot?
Yeah.
And our answer for the longest time was like ASP.NET Core and .NET. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What else is there? They have DI, we have DI. They have like, I think it wasn't just the bits and bobs. Like we have all the parts.
Yeah.
We had telemetry, we had YARP, we have all these things, but there's no Spring Boot that kind of says, here is your paved path, right? So that was definitely inspiration. Like, do we have a paved path? Do we have a system? Do we have a thing that we can kind of that glues all the bits and bobs together to be like a system?
Yeah.
And it's funny, the more I learn about DevOps, the more I spend time learning what people do. I learn Pulumi and Terraform and what those systems are and what people do today. The more I realize there's no system that you target. You just kind of cobble multiple systems together.
Yeah.
And I think Aspire for me, in my head, what it's becoming is it's becoming a system. It's like I can target Aspire, and if I model it, if I model my app and my system this way, I get these benefits, right? And it's on us to figure out how do we make it so that if you tell us this information, we can give you all this stuff. The premise of what we said in the very first meeting was if you describe your application's topology to us, we can tool it. Like that's our mindset. It's like,
Yeah.
if you tell us Redis, if you talk to Redis and you just give that information, we can make sure you are in a super secure VPC or a VNet. We can make sure you use the best kind of auth in between those two things. And sure, like, if you're doing platform engineering or you have like a dev and DevOps split, maybe the person that's the expert in infra can do it. But what if we can turn this into a compiler? Like that was the thought.
Yeah.
You model the entire world, and then there's a runtime for local dev and a compiler for like other scenarios. And like that's what we're exploring now.
So would you say that, because you kind of have this functionality already, but would you say that Aspire will get to a point where you wouldn't need Pulumi because you can define your infrastructure just with Aspire?
Or maybe it uses Pulumi on the covers. Like
Yeah.
What we've been playing with, what I've been playing with, like is how do we go from right now we have support for deploying using AZD, right? So that was and Aspirate, that was the proof. It was like, okay, let's just get this thing working. Let's make sure we understand the model. Let's understand. And now we have a lot more information about like what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we have a model for like, okay, this system we envision, and we kind of advertise, oh, you can take the manifest and blah, 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 blah with. We said that up front, and we had 2 examples, but it's not until you try pushing it that you kind of understand where it falls off, where it doesn't work, where it does work. And we've done enough of that now to be like, okay, this is going to be super interesting. Like, it's going to be really cool what we can do with this model if we can just like get people to use the app for local dev. And then you tell them, hey, F5 works great, right? What if you could like go to the next phase?
Yeah.
The next phase. So in my head, F5 is the main scenario. You start with F5, you get local dev working, and then you slowly bring people over to like, well, you told us you needed all this stuff. Like,
yeah,
guess what you get for free? CI/CD scripts, and like maybe we can go the whole way, right?
Yeah.
Still early, but and we don't want people to assume they have to use it up front. So like local dev is the very easy. Use this in your local dev loop. It'll give you this good experience with the dashboard and traces and logs. Will set you up for success. But then like we're working on trying to figure out, we have this really rich model. What do we do with it?
Yeah. You talked about AZD. AZD is the Azure Developer CLI. Yeah. Which when Aspire came out, that also came out, and you're able to do like AZD init on the app host level, I think, at the project, and then it checks everything, and it generates effectively the bicep scripts that you need to use behind the scenes to deploy to Azure. However, as cool as that is, and as cool as this option to have it is, nobody really deploys to production like that. The deployment process, the CI/CD story, is so complicated nowadays that a simple command like this would just not cut it. So I feel like it's there just to be there because you felt like you have to have a path to Azure because, .NET is a free product. In a way, it sells Azure. Let's not hide behind our finger. Let's just accept it. That's the case.
That's where I work. I work in Microsoft.
Exactly.
We
and,
thought.
and the story has to be there. And the good thing is Microsoft actually helped very closely with AWS for them to also get involved on their side of things.
Yep.
I think they completely choked their side of things, and we can talk about this later, because I fundamentally disagree with everything they've done with Aspire. But the AZD.up and AZD.down, it's nice to have. It's not production ready. It's never going to be production ready for a serious company.
Right.
So I'm teaching Aspire in workshops all around the world. In fact, I actually started doing online. Awesome. I started doing online workshops. I had one on Monday, actually, a 2-day workshop, and I'm doing one online on at the end of Friday. Link in the description down below. And as part of my teaching, I always encourage people to ask questions, and people get to the point where they say, "That's so cool," and we hit what I call the now what phase, because the documentation and everything is built so nicely for the developer experience.
It's one scenario. Yeah. But it's not good for deployment.
And then you reach this point where, okay, now how do I deploy this properly? And Microsoft has nothing, which is a 180 from Project Thai, which was way too opinionated and it assumed way too much. And then you went 180 and you said, we're going to assume nothing and we're going to give you this manifest, which is practically useless. Like it's
good luck.
Take this JSON file, pause it, and build your own stuff. And we just happen to be lucky enough for the person who made Aspirate, which at least you can create a Docker Compose file with it, or you can create the Kubernetes assets for it. But in my opinion, Microsoft needs to get their shit together and improve tooling and give me this option of Docker Compose and as a bare minimum Kubernetes by default. I should be able to do .NET Aspire, publish Kubernetes or publish Docker Compose and get everything I need to just say Docker Compose up or kubectl, basically deploy. Will we see this?
Of AZD up. So you want the equivalent of what Aspirate does in a more first-class way.
Yeah, and if I do that, then I can introduce it, I'm sure, in my official CI/CD pipeline with the Microsoft commands. I'm sure versioning would be there as well and everything. And then it makes it easier to publish an image to my...
Makes it more, Yeah. So the timing of this conversation is really good because, like, I have really clear thoughts on what we built now. So, like, when you build something new, and you're trying to figure out what you've built. Like that's kind of where we were when we shipped 8.0. We knew we had something. We knew it was going to be useful. We were not surprised about the feedback, right? We made this end-to-end work, this vertical work. And when you're building, it's funny, I have a lot of experience now building new things. And I'll say comparing when we built like ASP.NET Core, and SignalR, where you're literally trying to figure out, we built DI logging, like everything that we built happened at the same time. And that kind of funnel is difficult to manage. So you have to prioritize the things that matter the most, right? So in the very beginning of Aspire, it was F5. And deployment was always going to be, it works for this one scenario. And we happened to get, like, Aspire was like a joke. It was like, thank you so much. You proved that it wasn't just Azure. Thank you. But then as you evolve, you begin to figure out like where the things fit. Right, so deployment is intentionally as of right now, left like in a state where you can do AZD or you can do your own thing, and we are hyper aware of the feedback. Actually, I did a ton of analysis. I took all the videos on YouTube that use about Aspire, and I look at the comments, and I try to find trends. I use AI to do all this stuff. And the number one trend is like the documentation for deployment is like subpar. Not only subpar, but bad, right? So the team is hyper aware. Part of the reason that we haven't fixed it yet is like when we built components, which are now called integrations, that part wasn't even well understood. So we had this weird naming. We had resources, then we had like components. So then we decided, Damien was like, let's call it integrations. Now we have a real thing, and we're redoing all the docs to be like, here's what integrations are. We're gonna fix the docs for deployment, but it won't be good yet. What you really want to know is how do we get from you have to use these two tools, and here's a manifest to like, here's a story that we have.
Yeah.
The plan, like, so what I've been doing this year is part of my role is to like project past the current year, past what we're working on right now. The team is working on like 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, but I'm working on 10. And 10, the next version, whatever that becomes, right? I'm trying to figure out how we take what we've learned from Aspirate, AZD, and how that moves forward in the future. Like we definitely, and I have prototypes of like all this stuff. So like we definitely want to support Kubernetes in a first class way and compose it. It just, those are the easy, just make sense things to build, right? How that gets packaged, how we make it work is not fully clear yet, but it is, to me, I think I understand now doing a bunch of research, like deployment is super complex because people just do a lot of different things. So I think we'll have the same pattern where we'll give you building blocks. We'll give you like a way to produce compose or Kubernetes manifest, but maybe we won't create the cluster. Maybe someone still has to glue the entire thing together.
Yeah.
But we want to build a system where you could have potentially deployment integrations. So let's say you don't want to use Bicep to go to Azure, you want to use Terraform, right? The idea would be someone wants to write a Terraform integration for Aspire, and they plug it in, and now they can write code to spit out Terraform instead of Bicep.
Yeah.
I think the way to think about this is like when we shipped the first preview of Aspire and we had support for AZ deployment, the manifest had resources that were typed Redis v0, Postgres v0, and it was very simple. And then we had to sit down and say, how do you modify like settings in Azure? And then we were like, well, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So like we pivoted super hard, and then we have a Bicep resource, and Bicep is like you can put arbitrary Bicep in there.
Yeah.
And we move more and more stuff into the app post and out of ACD. So the progression has been super hacky thing that works in this one scenario, more robust thing that works in more scenarios. Zoom out some more. Okay, if we did this, now we can support anything, not just container apps, but AKS and other platforms. So we're on this we're on a path. It's a journey, but so that the reason you won't see docs tomorrow that says you should do, and it's making people super mad, by the way. Like we are super aware, and we're gonna do enough to make sure you can understand what currently works and what you should be doing for other scenarios. But the intent is definitely like as flexible. We want to make deployment as flexible as we do development stuff, right? Like that's the intent.
Yeah.
But that requires us to do a ton of design work around extensible publishers, what we've calling them so far. Because right now we have one. If you want to like think about interface implementation, we built this interface, and we have one implementation. Is for Azure. Actually, it's not for Azure. It's for AZD specifically.
Yeah.
The output we produce only works in AZD. To make it work, otherwise you can have to build a whole bunch of crap around it. And Aspirate built the same thing, but for Kubernetes and Compose and Helm, right? And now we have two interfaces, two implementations of that interface. And now we're in the process of trying to figure out, okay, how do we genericize this pattern? And my hope is that this year we'll have like an answer to the whole thing. Like, just so you know, like we are in close talks with Dave, like the guy who wrote Aspirate, and like the goal is to pull it back into the main project. So you will definitely see. I am assuming nothing changes. Big progress in that space this year.
Yeah. Please change the name when it comes in.
It won't. Yeah, it won't be
Thank you.
different this time. Yeah.
Call it pneumonia or something. Code name.
Call it vomit.
You mentioned versioning a bit, and the versioning of Aspire is interesting. Because you guys are like cowboys, like, don't give a fuck about anything. Yeehaw! Here's the 9.1. Here's the 9.2. I don't care.
Oh yeah. We're. I mean, so one of the things that was set up front was that we don't want to align with the .NET ship schedule. Like we as in, we will align with .NET when it ships, but we want to be able to ship monthly.
Yeah.
And I think it's new for people that are used to the .NET 1-year cadence. But I think when you're in like new product mode, we want to iterate as fast as possible to get to a place where like all the basic complaints are gone. Like my whole thing was, So last year, I had another baby. I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
And
Congrats.
thanks. That's why I haven't slept in like a year. But the thing we wanted to do for 9, right? It was like we had a set of complaints after 8. I told the team like the goal is to get rid of people's day 1 complaints. Anything to complain about on day 1, we have all the feedback. Let's just fix it.
Yeah.
Right. So like 9.x, I think people who haven't used Aspire yet, who will end up joining in like 9.2, 9.3, are gonna be like super happy because it will just do all the basic stuff really well, right? Because we would have worked out all the kinks and figured out all the weird parts. Like testing is a new focus for us. So
Yeah.
one of our devs, like testing was not in the plan, by the way. We were not doing anything with testing.
Yeah.
One of our devs, Ruben, he just like said, testing is important. And I was like, okay. And then he just built it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we'll ship it. And now we're seeing that being like a really, really, really big useful part of the entire stack.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna pivot the team and spend more time making testing like work really well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna have the goal is for 9.x to have a really solid inner loop dev, what we call the inner loop dev F5, the F5 cycle.
Yeah.
Inner loop and test story.
Mm-hmm.
Like one that is unmatched, right? Because like the things we want to do with testing that people have asked for, I could be wrong. I haven't seen anything do this.
Yeah.
There's test containers. It's really cool. You know, you can have your app here. You can boot a container. You can run it. What we're talking about is like just to express what we want to do. Like, and this is on the issue, so it's not nothing is private. It's open source.
Yeah.
You have a system, right? You have like A talks to B, talks to C, talks to D, database stuff in between. What we have right now, you boot the entire system, and you poke from the outside. You send requests to it, right? And you can't mock because we're booting a process.
Yeah.
And that makes everyone like confused. Everyone's like, how do I mock? You're booting. It's like spinning up your entire system over here,
mm-hmm.
and then sending requests and getting responses. Yeah. This is not about like mocking out the auth provider because you're literally running it. But enough people have asked to like stub out individual services that I'm like, what system does this? Like, if you've ever used what's the Kubernetes thing where you can like there's a Kubernetes based thing where you can kind of poke one of the services out of the cluster and make it route traffic locally.
Yeah.
Like we can do the same thing but for your app post. So the goal is I want to declare which of my resources are services I want to mock locally. And then any calls into that service get routed to your code directly in test. And like we know how to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just like, do people really want this? And it turns out
you would do something like that with Wiremock if you were running like integration tests.
Wiremock, yeah, APIs, yep.
So Wiremock will do the same thing. And
yep.
I think there is room for a distributed application factory class that works in the same way the same way as the web application factory would work.
Yeah.
I can see people want that. There are better ways, in my opinion, to deal with it. I've been prototyping. So for me, just to give you a bit of context, I think that if Aspire can be extremely successful on something, is to be an end-to-end or integration testing platform.
Good. Okay.
I think that if someone wants to make the next big thing in .NET, they should build a framework that uses the distributed application builder and all that jazz, and then rewire services and allow you to override containers and whatever it is, and execute tests, whether that's with K6, NBOMber, or any other service. It doesn't matter whether you want it to be performance tests or you want to be integration end-to-end. I think there's a big story there. Because all the pieces of what you would do on a staging environment or even pre-prod, if you want to run any type of testing, is there. Like, you can do it. The only problem currently is deployment, but that will get fixed. So I think there's room for it. Should it be your priority? I'd fix tooling before I fixed that.
What do you mean by tooling?
I should have a .NET Aspire command that allows me to say .NET Aspire add and mention a package name and add it. .NET Aspire publish Kubernetes or publish manifest or publish compose and create everything. And I've seen
Like
what Matt is working on, and I'm not sure I can talk about it. I can't talk about it. Can I talk?
I don't even know what it is.
Okay, I'm gonna cut it if I can't talk about it. We can briefly
Okay.
mention I saw Aspire run,
Oh, okay.
and I saw Aspire grow.
No, so I don't know what girl is.
Okay,
we,
maybe that was
we,
new.
we discussed. So in my aspirations for Aspire Talk, the one where I promised things that we maybe
Yeah.
aren't gonna do, like I say some of this stuff, right? So like
Yeah.
we want to have an Aspire CLI. I would say nothing is confirmed yet, but there's a lot of experiments that are being done around the front end. Like maybe what do we have on the command line? What do you use? What does it do?
Yeah.
I think like I've done enough to kind of project what I think we should build. But like normal, I build some prototype, we show the team, we iterate on that prototype, and then it gets broken into like we do this first and that first and this first. We sequence the work, right? It's interesting you call that tooling because we did Aspire in 8 and we did the VS story, and then we kind of improved the VS Code story, but it's still not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And like there's no command line story, so you can't really do the same things from the command line. So that's happening concurrently. So as an example, .NET Watch got rewritten completely.
Yeah.
To make Aspire
so it can work
right?
with Aspire.
Yeah. And that's coming in the 90200, which is pretty soon.
Yeah.
But that took like a big effort to like rewrite the whole thing and then like make it support what we do in this what we call the IDE protocol.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to figure out, if you think about designing a product like this, there's like fixed number of resources, and you can say we're Microsoft, we have like a huge team, but we don't. That's not how big companies work. Big companies don't say we're gonna put 1,000 people on a project, and plus that would even be useful.
Yeah.
Right. What ends up happening most of the time is like, and the Aspire team is extremely like experienced. The team is very, 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 very good engineers, right? So we can give engineers like big things and have them go off and just like build the whole piece, the whole thing, right? So now we're in like refinement, polish, and improve all the warps mode. We ship the thing without support for Watch, fix Watch. As a whole engineer for like a couple of months, you're trying to fix that whole thing. So I think you'll see it. People should be patient. We are like trying to figure out with a sprawl of stuff we can do. What do we do first?
Yeah.
Like one thing that came up recently was auth. We don't do anything specifically for auth yet. And there's all these cool ideas to build an auth proxy, kind of like easy auth. Like, do we do that? Do we make it end to end where you can just deploy and it gives you an Entra app and it does all the wiring for you? Like we can now automate all this stuff. So we're balancing the vertical. Do we do auth as a vertical and make auth really good? Do we make SQL Server really amazing, or do we build more platform features to rise the tide on all boats?
Yeah.
And it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
As an example, we shipped persistent containers in 9. And you can say like persist past the lifetime. People love it, but there's all kinds of bugs. Like where if you mount volumes with a random temp file, which we do all over the place, it changes run to run, so the container like just dies and gets recreated.
Right.
If you randomize passwords and you don't use the same one from the last run, so we're in the phase of like, okay, all the stuff we built, let's just make it work really well.
Yeah.
and then like add more things. So I think it's possible that like if someone were to use Aspire next year, they would be like, oh my gosh, this is me gonna project. Oh my gosh, I can dev locally with F5.
Yeah.
I can run a command and I can run Aspire verb spit out a CI/CD script. I can use that, put it on GitHub Actions or ADO pipelines or GitLab. I can Aspire deploy and get it all working. I can grab the toolkit and get an auth proxy, hit F5 and test out my auth.
Yeah.
I can deploy a thing to a thing and get ingress and Kubernetes. That's what we want to build. It's not and as a platform team, I see Aspire as like a thing you target. Right? It's not just a tool you use, it's a platform you target. And that's I think where it differentiates from other systems. The toolkit is where you can grab the crazy idea that someone had that is like someone added support for, I don't know, the emulator for something that doesn't have one, but it
Yeah.
was built from scratch. And now you can F5 it locally and it just works. And it isn't cobbled together scripts that you have to clone from GitHub and use. And like the vision is really about us making a thing like ASP.NET Core, like it's that level of a platform piece, but not for web projects.
Yeah.
For like building applications,
Yeah.
right? Composing applications made of arbitrary things.
Yeah.
And then someone built an ngrok plugin. Like
Yeah.
in the next version of the toolkit, you can add the ngrok plugin and point it at your app, and you'll just get proxying for free. Like that, we didn't build that. We didn't have to design
cool.
this thing. We just built this platform where people
Yeah.
can tweak endpoints with like code and it isn't to say you couldn't do it today. You can go to ngrok, get the tool locally, tell all your devs, hey guys, run ngrok, look in the launch settings, grab that port, put it in here. That could be in your README.
Yeah.
Or you can be like, grab the ngrok resource and hit F5.
Yeah.
Like, that's the vision.
That is sick. I don't want to move away from the tooling discussion just yet. I just want to make a last comment though. You said interesting you talk about it as tooling. For me, on an open source cross-platform modern technology, everything starts on the CLI and it goes upwards.
Yeah.
I find it a bit insulting as a developer in an environment like this, in a multi-ID environment, that VS was the only ID that got
the first one.
Oh yeah, well, and it wasn't it was the first one for a while. I mean, right after there was a Rider plugin, but even for VS Code users, it's not even about Rider. To not have that at launch, I think you guys should not be designing that way. I understand the reasoning, VS is another product we sell, so we have to, but
well,
it doesn't really make sense because you cannot like give me the C# dev kit, which is awesome, but then not have it ready.
Not have all the things.
Yeah, it just isolates a big chunk of the ecosystem.
Yep.
And that's the last comment I want to make, just so everyone understands where I stand with this. I talked about it when it came out as well, but I have many questions and we have too little time. That's unfortunate, but
shoot.
I think
keep going.
The most important one I have is the second biggest complaint I get in workshops, which is, do I need to have everything in a monorepo for Aspire to even make sense? So, and you added the add project.
That thing doesn't work. It kind of works,
but it kind of works. It does.
Yeah.
It's held together with duct tape and Dreams, but there's also you have a very nice, cool source generator that finds the path, and it's like, that's amazing. But I say nobody. The vast majority of people do not have everything necessarily in relative paths, so you can use the add project, and they don't have necessarily everything in a single solution. They just don't.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a problem. And unless you have then an isolated solution that only manages your everything, really.
Yeah, it's monorepo kind of thing.
Yeah, you kind of implicitly making a monorepo then. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you see any solutions and ideas? I have some, and I'm very cheap. I'll give them to you for free. So
last night, I had a conversation because she mentioned that where she is, she's getting a lot of questions about this too. And just small segue, Aspire adoption inside Microsoft is really good. And we didn't tell anyone to use it. They just are picking it up for local dev.
Well, that's why people are that's why people are trusting it, as opposed to Blazor had a bit of a who's using it.
We use Blazor. Yeah, that always happens. I saw the you and Dan talking about Blazor as well. But it's an interesting discussion. But I think having seen what people are asking for, right, and what they want, my conclusion is the multi-repo problem is a source sharing problem. It's the same problem you have when you want someone to consume your software, your library, your whatever in the same company, in the same org, in the same whatever. So if you were gonna zoom out and treat the problems like that, like what's the solution today? NuGet, right? So you use
Yeah.
NuGet to share source software libraries across the org,
Hmm.
right? So if you treat if you treat your microservice, and maybe your service is like a REST API, a database, and a cache. If you treat that like a unit, and it's the same as Redis, like Redis has some software that they use and they put it in a container, and you consume it and you configure it. If you treat your microservice or your piece of the pie that way, then you're producing an integration. You're producing for someone else an integration that they can use in their app host.
Yeah.
So the way I see it is like each project has their own app host,
Mm.
right? So you are the backend team that is going to provide the APIs for people to consume to get products. And then there's one for categories, and there's one for like there's 4 teams, right? They're all F5ing. And my assumption is that those teams don't need, I mean, maybe some depend on other ones, but like you are gonna have your own isolate, because if you didn't, then you wouldn't be a microservice. You would be like
Yeah.
a monolith. So everyone has their own world, and then some team downstream needs to use the backend service produced by these teams, right?
But also this front end service from over there, let's say.
Exactly. So the way I think about this is like if you consider this like what you would do today if you were doing source sharing, right? I'm not sure you would want to clone the repositories. Cloning to me is like the lowest level version of this. I want to build your software. Like that's fine. It's not the end of the world, but like it's complex. I got to clone. I got to figure out what tag to clone, what version to clone. I put it all on disk in the right layout. There's a package called poly repo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Aspire extension that someone built that clones the repo locally.
Yeah.
Let's say it clones and then you can consume it. That's fine. That's not a big deal. But I think in my ideal world, each repo is producing NuGet packages.
Mm-hmm.
So like the category service and the product service, they produce a NuGet package. That package is a hosting integration.
Yeah.
And then front end team says, I'm gonna install the category service from my team thing, and in their app host they call add category service.
Yeah.
Now, to make the entire thing work well end to end, to make it work the way things work today, you would need to have a container registry or some way to package the application in a NuGet package that's runnable. Today,
Yeah.
we don't have runnable apps from packages. You either have to do like a tool
Yeah.
or a container image. So I guess depending on your level of sophistication, do you have a shared registry in your org? If you don't have one, then that seems like a little bit of a burden, right? So one of the things I've been thinking of is like, how do we basically make it so you can package the application in a NuGet package and then consume it in another app?
Yeah.
Because then the end to end would be, I'm a service team or I'm a team using Aspire. Team B wants to consume my service. My default option will be I'm going to produce a package for them.
Mm-hmm.
But today, getting from your solution to a package is like, you got to figure out how to package your thing. And so I can see a tool chain where you just pack your app host as a library.
Yeah.
Like give me an integration for my application.
Mm-hmm.
And not might have 10 dependencies, but we encapsulate all your dependencies as like a top level method. Like give me the blast service.
Yeah.
And that's how you do all this multi-repo things. Like that, to me, that feels better than Git cloning like on the fly and making a sub-module multi-repo end-to-end. Yeah.
I think the reason why some people want the cloning option is there are cases where if you're just debugging the entire system that you might want to be able to step into that code.
Yeah.
And I think
that's fair.
And I think if you need that, if you're at that level, then just clone the repo and run it. But I think it would be really cool. I don't think it's needed, but I think it would be really cool if Microsoft did like an official story for that, because even
Yeah.
if you say each team would have their own app host, then what if I want to have an app host that runs everyone app host, and I build?
Then the question is do you just want tools to make your monorepo easier? Because people complain about monorepos, but like
Yeah,
then they ask for that, and I'm like, so you do want a monorepo, you want one built on the fly for you,
yeah,
and that to me is like that's fine. That's not a big problem,
yeah,
but then you can't complain about monorepos like you
yeah,
because you want one.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
you want, 'cause you want
That's
one.
true. If you put it that way, it makes sense.
Yeah, people maybe they want a just-in-time repo, like a just-in-time
Yeah,
repo that they can manifest on the fly. Like Tai had a feature where you could pull in another Tai YAML from a different repository and it would clone it for you.
yeah,
And as convenient as that is, it always felt like, okay, well, it did the clone. Who's gonna update the clone? Like, who's gonna manage the Git repository? Are we supposed to manage it, or is that just a one-time pull? Like, yeah, you have. It's funny. You have all the same issues as like. I guess you could put a tag in there and pull and like update the tag if it's not the right tag.
yeah,
If you treat a repo like how we treat a container image, I could see it being a thing. Like, add Git repository that does the clone in the back end and it pulls it locally, and you can pull source from there. That's it's not the end of the world. I just think I'm not sure people have thought through the implications of like managing this like long term thing. Like it's
yeah.
someone's source. It's a whole source tree. It's not just like a project. It's like you're pulling in their entire project
Yeah.
with their build CMD and you're basically ignoring all their stuff and pulling in this one project.
I think
But
it
yeah.
would, sorry to interrupt, it would make sense.
No, go ahead.
Because let's say you have two microservices in your own
Yep.
team, right? But they're separate microservices.
But why?
But why they're separate?
Separate why? If you need both.
Let's say you have an e-commerce website and you have the product catalog API
Yep.
and the pricing API.
Yep.
And the pricing API needs to be scaled differently because you see pricing way more than you see product or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But they talk to each other. If you want to spin up both, you have to run two app host projects. And that's fine, but I'd like to see my telemetry and my correlation, my spans and everything together. And there's no way to merge, at least telemetry on the built-in dashboard. Yes, you can push it in the same Prometheus and then use a Grafana dashboard to visualize it, or even better, App Insights. I'm gonna put a sound effect.
Wink.
Yeah, wink, wink. But I think there is a lot basically to discover there, and the whole how everything hangs together.
Oh, there is.
And maybe I think it's too early to even discuss that because there's bigger fish to fry, like the support cycle. Because the support cycle indicates, in my opinion, in many cases, product readiness.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have support cycle like Aspire, which is not on the .NET STS LTS model, but the moment a major or minor version is out, the old one is just immediately out of support. That indicates the move fast and break things, but it also indicates that using this, you take a significant risk right now. What do you think about that?
That's a good assessment. Like, I think really early on, we knew we wanted to make bigger changes, and the product doesn't have the shape it needs yet.
Yeah,
it's not done yet, right? We made a lot of breaking changes, but I think we learned so much from doing .NET Core. Yeah. We just learned so much from doing the Wild West thing that I think we have a really good model for how we think about breaking. Like, we did insane stuff in ASP.NET where we would break things super hard every preview version, and people were like super annoyed and bounced out of that super early. I think with Aspire, we adopted the we're gonna obsolete APIs aggressively. We're gonna mark things preview. We have enough features now to manage it in a way that's not just like someone deleted all the parameters and now my method is not working anymore. We have enough integrations built on top of the platform that we're thinking about, like, okay, if we deprecate this core feature, what do we do with all the integrations? Yeah. So I'd say, like, I wouldn't worry so much, and this is bias talking, I wouldn't worry so much about the wild breaking changes from build to build. The team has a lot of experience now managing like how we release features, and we still make mistakes. We now have this thing called preview features. So
Yeah.
we have a thing you can put on methods that we aren't sure about yet, and we'll put it out there. So it's less move fast and break things, and more like move fast, and we have a lot of tools now to indicate that we're gonna break things in the future.
Yeah.
As an example, the Dapper support is obsolete
Yeah.
in 9.1 because it moved to the toolkit,
Yeah.
right? So when you use it, you won't get a binary breaking change. It'll still work.
Yeah.
But then there's a gradual move to say like remove this package, add this package, change namespace, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
Right. So I would say yes, definitely move fast. Yes, we want to ship often. Yes, we are still changing the platform, but it's with so much more care than we had. So much more care and so many more tools than we had before.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was like we had this thing called pubternal. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Public internal.
Okay.
And like I recall when we were doing it in ASP.NET Core, it was like we don't want to use internal. Like horrible to use internal. People can't extend things. But then pubternal, it was the other side of the world. It was like we released all these APIs, and then it was like crap. This thing kind of sucks. Are we gonna remove it? And we had a release where we made all the pubternal stuff internal.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things are what make people mad because it is sweepingly breaking, right?
Yeah.
Having gone through that several times, our mantra with Aspire is like, yeah, we can make breaking changes, but we're gonna stage them.
Yeah.
So like this thing is obsolete. You get a few versions to kind of observe it, and then we'll just yoink it from the stack. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I remember even Node in the beginning when it first came out, it was breaking people like crazy. Because new product, you're still discovering, and what you think you're putting out is not what you should put out, and the way people consume it is not the way you expected it to be consumed, but it makes sense to be consumed that way, so you improve that experience. So as breaking as it might be, it makes sense. You know,
and the whole thing you mentioned about support readiness is true. It means being prepared for support. Like it's true that like the life cycle is designed such that we don't want to take on the burden yet.
Yes,
there'll be a moment where it flips.
Okay,
and we had long discussions about like, do you want to be LTS? Do you not want to be LTS? I'm like, are we ready to be LTS? So we had a lot of discussion about like, if we do this, like we can't innovate. We can't innovate in the way we want to innovate. We can't get to that point quickly for a long time. So you're going to sacrifice adoption for people who are like, I need this thing to be in the same LTS to use it. And that was we made that trade-off. We just said, okay, that's fine. We can deal with less users who are more highly engaged in the beginning. And then by the time we're ready to do the LTS thing and people jump on board, we'll have a solid foundation. It'll be much, much more stable. We'll have a lot of extensions, a lot of plugins, and we would have had a lot more feedback from highly engaged users super early on.
Yeah.
Like I did this analysis with ChatGPT where I looked at all the YouTube comments that I could find, right? Yep. And I was trying to figure out sentiment over time.
Yeah.
So your videos have the most comments before. It was kind of incredible. Like sentiment from when Aspire shipped, like what the hell is it was the biggest sentiment. Like,
yeah.
And I charted like the what the hell is it over time. And Maddie's job, when she came in as PM, her first job was to help us fix that sentiment.
Yeah.
Like how do we start telling people what this thing is and what it's good for, right? And the thing that I kept saying was less adjectives and more nouns. Like just stop adding all these random adjectives to the thing. It's like it's like we're talking to devs, right? And the sentiment changed because now people understand what it is. There were more videos, there was more content, there was more things, and it's like, oh, now I know what it is. Now I get it. Now when it first came out, this Kubernetes.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort your the comments by like most recent.
Yeah.
To see if the sentiment changed, like if they get it, like, do you get it now, or is it still the same old thing?
Yeah.
So I feel like we are in a place where we made this trade-off, where we're saying we need to iterate quickly. We need to ship miners. We need to not be LTS yet. We need to get the platform to a place where we feel like confident, but in a way that's not as crazy as when we did Core in the first place. And yeah, we made an explicit trade-off. And we know
Yeah.
for sure, because I mean, people tell us, they're like, your thing is an LTS, I can't use it, and we'll be like,
Yeah.
okay, but try anyway.
On that note, then I want to ask you, and I do this with everyone from Microsoft that I talk to.
Yeah.
And if you've seen Dan's interview, you know what's coming.
Yep.
Where do you stand about the whole STS LTS discussion? How do you feel about the 18 versus 36 versus whatever else could be better in your opinion?
I think we need to change something there's a discussion recently about this internally, about what tweak could we make to make the conversation go away, right? I think it's one thing to talk about LTS versus STS, but there's like a few specific points that I think come up super often that we could address that would help make the conversation be easier, right? Like when you give people an easy thing to attack, they just attack it.
Yeah.
So 3 years, like you could say 5 years or 10 years, like 3 years is 3 years. That one I'm pretty hardcore on. It's like, okay, it's 3 years. If it's too short, like,
I agree with the 3 years thing for the record. I think 3 years is perfect, and I think people who say it's too short are irrational. My problem is not with the 3 years.
I know.
My problem is with the other part.
I agree. I feel like initially I was like, this is fine. Given all the feedback, maybe it's time to consider like that there should be no big overlap. But yeah, I don't know what will happen, but I think there's been enough feedback for that specific thing that maybe we should figure out ways to make it so that people don't have this staunch like perception that STS is lower quality, that I'm gonna have to rush to update to the LTS because of the overlap of the thing. I mean, we get the same feedback from people that use Microsoft internally, that use .NET internally.
Yeah.
So it's not brand new, and I think there's been more rounds of discussions because we're now shipping things as packages that depend on non-LTS versions. Like if you use System Text JSON 9
on
in a .NET 8 app,
you're like, 6 months of no support. 6 months of no support.
Are you supported?
You know.
Yeah, so I think those practical problems are being reassessed now.
Okay. I mean, it makes
but the 3-year thing, like,
no, like, the 3-year thing for me, it's a shame for me that every other version of .NET, the vast majority of .NET developers will not get to experience it until the next thing comes out.
Next LTS, yeah.
And then you take up more risk, even if the risk is minor, because now you have the risk factors of two versions, right? So, and I've said this on Twitter or whatever. I think there shouldn't be an STS. I think every version should be 3 years. Or if that's not the case, then at least the libraries of the STS should be supported for 24 months. Then this complicates support. But I talked to Stephen Tobe about this, and he said like 1/3 of developers, at best case scenario, are the ones that upgrade, or even less, to the STS version.
Yeah. There's always a dip.
Yeah.
A big dip.
And it's a shame, right? Because the quality is not different. The C# version that ships with the version is not less quality or less ready. I talked with Mads. I asked Mads about this exact same thing, and the interview, by the way, with Mads would have come out, so people would have seen it. But he said it doesn't make literally zero difference to me. Can I ship this feature complete on this version? I ship it. Do I have to ship it on the next? I do. But whether it's an even or an odd, zero difference to him. And we've seen it. We've seen big features in either version. Yeah. So yeah, it's just a shame, really.
It is. And I can say the conversation has come back up recently. So it's not as though, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, but I think there has been enough events that have happened recently to make us discuss the whole thing again. I think one of the issues that came up on the Aspire repo is OpenTelemetry now depends on the 9.0 versions of
Oh,
.NET without the TFM split. So if we update the template to be the new OTel versions, it hoists your entire
yeah.
dependency graph to be 9. You know what's funny? Like, so I worked on NuGet, right? I worked on the original NuGet, and I worked on like when we built .NET Core, like we rewrote NuGet,
Yeah.
like we rewrote the algorithm from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've been having the discussion about lifting versions and how do you stay in support and LTS STS from that point of view for a while.
Yeah.
And when there's a patch that comes out for a dependency somewhere in the graph, like do we have to reship the entire thing, like, or do we have to reship just that one part? And how do you hoist dependencies? This is all intertwined. It's like, is this NuGet features that to keep you on that version? Do we have to tell package authors to target different versions based on the TFM? Like, how do we avoid this weird thing?
Yeah.
And the whole thing is about, am I still supported? You don't want to install a package and be unsupported. I think that is
Yeah.
the visceral customer scenario, right? It's like, I installed this random package. It depended on a newer version of the JSON package, and I'm out of support
Yeah.
for like .NET. Like, huh? That's the thing I think everyone has to feel, and we have to fix.
Yeah.
Because that feels like kind of crazy, right? Like,
That's
how can this package get me on support?
I didn't even know about this until Steven mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because your brain just doesn't go there. And I had some discussions with some other people at the conference this week. And they're like, what? Wait, what? Are you serious? It's like, yep.
Yeah.
It's out of support. It's just, you have to downgrade to the latest 8 version if you want to, like, updates. It's, yeah. At least it's good to know that it's on your radar in some capacity and something might happen.
Yeah.
And
I think this time feels like an action might happen because of who's talking about it. Stephen Toub is like involved, and like a bunch more people are pushing harder. It's funny. It's like C# features, right?
Yeah.
It requires a champion. If you don't see a champion, from the team, like on the feature, then it's just a fairy tale.
Yeah.
You can envision any feature you want. You can make up anything you want, any syntax you want. You can see a proposal. If there's no champion on the team who's gonna like be the champion for that feature, like, it's not gonna happen. And I think that pattern in general applies to like bigger features. Like if you want to change policy, you need someone with some pull to be like, I am gonna be the one who's gonna drive and push and make change. If it's kind of left in the air and no one's accountable, it's like people are complaining. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be in charge to like solve this problem, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's really, really nice to hear. Yeah. Then, given we only have 10 minutes max, I want to ask you the last question, which is, what's next for .NET Aspire? What's the thing that really excites you that hopefully, or maybe we haven't talked about it, even if we talked about it, just,
Yeah. So I spent a lot right now. So we do customer studies where we go and talk to customers about how they do X, Y, and Z. We're doing a lot now for CI/CD and DevOps style task and deployment and team makeups to figure out like what to target first and stuff. I think over the break and in the beginning of the year, like so far, when you've built something and you haven't quite figured out exactly what you're doing, I feel like I figured out like what we've built and what we're building.
Yeah.
And like how the model kind of falls out of like what you're doing a thing and there's something there and you're doing all this stuff and then you crack the nut. I feel like we've cracked something. And I figured out like what we've cracked, and now it's like everything is falling into place, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, how do we take this understanding that we have now what we're building and turn it into actual like a timeline for doing features?
Yeah.
So like deployment, right? I feel like in my head, I know exactly what we have to write, like the code we have to do and where it has to go and stuff. But someone has to write the code and make it like do actual engineering work. An example of this is like the model we have today for resources. We shipped it, but it's not sound, right? Yeah. There's a bunch of like warts in the design.
Yeah.
And so now like we had a discussion and now like we cracked it. oh, this is how it works. Oh, this is perfect. This is really good. Um, how we made the AZD work
Yeah.
at first. Super happy, like hard coded things here and there. Have a discussion about it. We have a meeting every Wednesday called Hard Problems, and it's 3 hours.
Yeah.
And we just like that's where we kind of crack on individual like hard features, like
Yeah.
how do we solve deployment? How do we solve Azure resources? How do we solve other things? And we went through like a bunch of the hard things,
Mhm.
and the model is just like shaking out.
Yeah.
You know when you figured out the platform, like the core,
Yeah.
you've like solved like the core problem. I think that's where we are now with Aspire. And I've been tweeting about CI/CD on like for a while now,
Yeah.
and it's because I've been doing all this research about like how people use it, how it works under the covers, like talking to the teams that built the CI/CD systems. I feel as though I'm talking to customers to see what they do today.
Mhm.
Feel like this may be like overpromising, but I feel like we're gonna be in a place by end of year where all the obvious complaints are gone, and people are gonna be like, my company does this really weird offshoot thing that you don't have support for, so I can't use all your thing, but I can see how it would fit. Like we'll have a model that they understand and can like explain what's happening to people in their team.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I think we realized was like if developers don't understand what's happening, then the tool is magic and bad. Like it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So on the comments, right, on your video,
Yeah.
I know how to use Kubernetes. I know how to use Helm. Like I get this stuff. If
Yeah.
you're making devs dumb,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, I could draw a line from the C# to the IL to the ASM.
Mhm.
Not everyone needs to know all the pieces, but if you know all the pieces, then and you understand how to make the C# turn into the Helm, then it's a tool you can use. It's not just
Yeah.
magic happening to you. It's like this is you can influence the outputs by changing the source, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I think we're gonna bleed that model that we designed for dev into CI/CD and deployment and that end to end.
Yeah.
And that to me will be like, okay, now we have the platform to target all the things, and now we got to figure out how to build up the entire planet. And yeah, the goal isn't to replace Pulumi or Terraform. The goal is to like potentially work with those things in
Yeah.
a first class way that's more integrated. Yeah,
That'd be sick.
yeah. It feels like we have something that's like unique.
Like it's
And
coming
a moment.
together now. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. The more you don't go in an LTS STS like loop, the more exciting it is.
It's true.
It is.
It's
I mean,
true, though.
it's
Yeah.
not even a
It's
joke. It's
true.
like it means they mean business. They're willing to like because once it gets into that loop, there's something you just can't change easily. So take your time is all I'm gonna say. You know.
We are the team is highly senior.
Yeah.
Like everyone on the team is principal engineers pretty much. And we are trying to figure out the map of features and where do we spend our if we were going to spend our money, biggest bang for the buck, right? And it's a mixture of biggest bang for the buck, flashy cool stuff.
Yeah.
You're obviously going to see AI. You're obviously going to see AI coming somewhere, right? But
Yeah.
what I'm hoping is that we've built enough of a base that those features are just like value add. Someone can just build the off story and not change the core platform. Someone can build anything else. And it's funny, it even took us a while to understand how to map. Like when Damien renamed components to integrations, it actually did something to our brains where it freed us.
Yeah.
Where we split integrations from the platform.
Yeah.
We triage bugs differently. Like we have a tag for every integration in MongoDB. So we can say like this release, we're going to spend time making that integration awesome. And it's kind of intentional time spent in that integration versus like in the first version, we made all of them work at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, we have to get them all off the ground, and it's like building the plane while trying to fly it. It's like nuts, right?
Yeah.
Now we can take our time and say like, we're going to make persistent containers work. And that's a cross-cutting feature. And we're going to say every integration we have to go through. So we can kind of have an issue where we're going to say like we're going to do A first, then B first, then C first. Once we get our head above water, then we get to choose. Like,
Yeah.
do we want to do this and that? And we're almost there. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Like now we can choose what we work on. Now it's not just when I run a watch it's buggy. Oh, VS Code doesn't work. Like
Yeah.
making tooling work across like, command line, VS Code, and VS, like that's a priority. And like I agree with you. Like, it's super unfortunate that we only did VS first. It's a good thing the team writer like made writer work because that we didn't
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
ask them.
Yeah.
We just were like, thank you for making it work. Here's protocol.
It wasn't even
and
right.
they made it work.
It wasn't even
Sorry,
JetBrains. It was
expedition, right?
it's some person they did that, and then I think it was brought in or something.
Yeah,
Because the plugin
So-
architecture is like it's the same for any ID, so it's very easy
kind
to
of
do.
amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
So I'm pretty happy about like that stuff. So
yeah,
yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here again. And I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
be looking at the comments when this goes out.
Oh yeah, funny. I
Sentiment
built a tool.
analysis. You did?
I built a tool for this. I told Maddie, I said, Maddie, like I am just so like it's funny. My exploration into AI, it started off because I was like, I don't want to write docs. Can I take all my answers that I answered on YouTube and GitHub and just like turn that into docs?
Yeah.
And that's where I started to go crazy. And I was like, oh, this is actually super useful.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I'm sure there's going to be plenty. Guys, be nice. And again, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And for you, as always, keep coding.